And that you did not leave the pictures behind as you thought at first. So we'll be able to show them a picture of Martin Buber.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
and more.
And more. That's really
Right,
good.
right.
So good to see you the other day. It was really good to see you and talk. And I'm really glad we could put this together. And I'm going to be learning, so bear with me.
Well, you are one of the best conversationalists that I know.
Well, we'll see.
And,
We'll see. Well, I don't think I can miss with you because you've had such a life that is so exciting and interesting. And we're going to be hearing about your experiences with Martin Buber, who I've had a great admiration of from afar. And you knew the man personally.
He was a great man and one of my main teachers.
What do you mean? You said you had 7 or so teachers or that have...
I had about 7 very unique teachers.
Okay.
In different fields of life.
Right, right. Welcome very, very much to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program Reverend Joseph Ben-David. He's the senior minister for the Church of Humanism. We're going to let him talk about that, how that came to be. And he's also, I guess, a Unitarian minister concerned with spiritual questions, but also questions of social justice over a long and distinguished career. I'm correct in that? And
That's
Joseph, if I may, welcome very much to Conversations. It's a great pleasure to welcome you again to the program.
Well, it is a pleasure to be here again.
Well, we met the other day. We meet on a couple of occasions. We had a great talk, and you recounted for me some of your experiences. And I wonder if maybe we could. We're going to be talking about your association with Martin Buber and other people in Israel at the very early stage before even the state emerged and so forth. But you had an experience. But maybe you could share your own background, where you were born and raised, and maybe some of that question, because when you were born and the situation in Eastern Europe you were born into, and then talk about your life experience, if you could, please.
Well, I was born in Czechoslovakia, in Prague.
And you were born what year now?
1920.
1920. Okay, boy, you're...
Yeah, that makes me now 86.
86, you got a lot... No, that's where all the wisdom comes from. You got a long
I don't know.
experience.
I've been around for a while.
And you've met some of the most interesting people philosophically that there were to meet, it seems to me, because...
well,
anyway, just a sidelight. But
I was threading a kind of a marginal path. And there you meet unique people.
Yeah.
You know, the first 20 years in the Czechoslovak Republic, I was concerned very much with anti-Semitism,
absolutely,
Zionism, and also the Czech democracy.
Okay.
Because the Czechs were under the Habsburg domination for about 300 years.
I see.
And they fought an enormous cultural and political struggle to gain their independence, which they did.
And you were in a Jewish household?
Well, my father was liberally Jewish, but we did not, for example, we did not have a kosher home.
All right.
We were not allowed to eat pork, but ham was okay. Because ham was like fish.
You're a ham-eating
yeah, right,
Jew.
Right.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
But at the age of about 15, I became a Unitarian, and I rejected my Jewish religion. I changed my religion, so to say.
Anything epiphany-like or something that caused that? Or what?
Well, it really happened on Yom Kippur when I was 13 years old.
About the time you'd be being bar mitzvah.
Yeah, I was looking around and see these people praying to something that didn't make sense to me, that didn't exist. And what they were doing was just nonsensical to me.
Which are these people you're talking about?
The Jewish
people in Czechoslovakia. You were in Prague? Or
in the great synagogue, you know, praying during Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
And so I walked out from the synagogue, and then I never returned.
And it was just...
Because it didn't make sense to me.
It was of a moment or a build-up? And had you been involved in things spiritual at an early stage, and was that part of the family?
Yeah, I was, you know, influenced by all kinds of philosophers, particularly Thomas Garrick Masaryk, the first president of the Czech Republic, who was a philosopher, and wrote extensively on many subjects.
Yes.
Politics, psychology, religion, and so on. And so I was quite, how should I say, a rationalist at that time.
Okay.
And that motivated me to become a Unitarian.
A Unitarian,
which
yeah.
is, you know, a kind of a very...
Catch-all. I mean,
Pardon?
you can be coming from almost any spiritual tradition and fit in with the Unitarian
Right,
umbrella, or
right,
under the
right,
Unitarian
right.
umbrella, yeah.
There was another professor, Professor Alexander Sommer-Batyak of the Charles University, who met me at the age of about 14 and influenced me very much, you know, with his ideas of naturalism as a religion.
Okay. When did you, if I may, we're going to talk about him in some, we have a recording of his voice, Mr. Martin Buber. Were you influenced at an early age by his writing? He was somewhat old, he was considerably older than you, but I know you had a personal relationship with him.
Well, the first time I met Buber in a meeting of about 20 people was in the year 1937.
So you're about 15.
About, no, 17.
17, right.
That was in the Prague Public Library, in a small room, and he was speaking about the prejudices of the youth. And I remember it like yesterday when he said, you know what is prejudice? Prejudice is when you think something before you understand it.
There's a lot of that in the world then, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And, you know, only later on I understood the profundity of that, what that means, you know, in terms of politics and bloodshed.
Yes,
actually.
right, yeah, absolutely.
You see, it's not just like a little philosophical, abstract, you know, issue.
I would say it might be the leading indicator of the way the human experience unfolded. There was all kinds of people doing things without understanding.
Racism, sexism, all these things,
They're all
they have all to do with
absolutely,
that.
yeah. And it's still in the saddle in many people's mind in
right.
terms of the way the world is organized. We don't have a really well-grounded thing. Had he written, and when did he write the famous, you know, I and Thou?
Well, that was before that. I think the first issue came out around 1921.
21, right around then, or when you were being born, actually.
His book, that most people really read it as words. But to understand Buber, one has to have a kind of a paradoxical mind.
All right, yeah.
You know, if you have if you just think in terms of linear thought,
which
it is like, you know, this is this and this is that, and from there is this. You will never understand really Buber in depth.
I think you wouldn't understand any comprehensivist thing from a linear perspective. I think linear thinking is one of the major problems confronting the human experience.
Sure.
Tunnel vision and that sort of thing. Yeah,
it's
specialization,
monolithic,
academic.
It's monolithic, it's mechanistic, and it's dogmatic.
Okay, right, yeah.
So,
but to understand him, it is not good to have a linear perspective in terms of comprehension.
Well, specifically him, because I relate to him in a very human sense. Before saying anything about his philosophy, let me tell you the few personal experiences that I had with him.
Please.
Where we are actually involved. When I came to Palestine, before it was Israel, in 1939.
39, you fled, you were Unitarian?
I was a Unitarian.
But were you also identified?
I was still sort of a mild Zionist.
Zionist.
Yeah, in a very liberal sense, you know, the idea to you know, take away the country from the Palestinians or aggressively, you know, attack them. That was completely out of question.
But you also had an Adolf Hitler rising in Germany.
Well, that was
looking to invade Poland and all that sort of thing.
Well, that was going on around that time.
And there was this prejudice against this anti-Semitism that was part of his thing. And were you a target of that? And did
Well,
your family flee that? Or
no,
what
I
was the situation
personally,
in Eastern Europe?
I
in that-
personally left with the last boat.
The last boat.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and my mother was scheduled to leave with the next boat, and she was already murdered in one of the worst concentration camps nobody ever heard of,
Really?
which was called Mala Prosnice in Poland.
Uh-huh.
They took about 2,000 Jews from Prague, and they worked them to death
Yeah, they were
within
work
2 months.
camps, yeah.
In 2 months, they were all dead.
I'll be darned.
And the ones who arrived and were already not capable of working, they were shot right away on the spot.
My
So it
Lord.
was a horrible thing.
It was a horrible thing, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to contemplate.
But I was lucky.
You were lucky. And you escaped with, you had you had made a bribe some Nazis.
Well, we
or
had
something.
to pay off the Nazis.
This
Yeah,
would
it was
be-
basically a bribe.
This would be,
yeah.
you had to bribe, and these were just Nazi, were these on orders from on high, or was it people who were
Well-
skirting the rules that were being brought down from on high by people who wanted the money, soldiers at a lower
I
level?
wouldn't know who
Uh-huh.
exactly the people were who got the money,
Uh-huh.
because that was going on through some second or third hand.
Uh-huh.
But the fact was that suddenly it was possible, if you had the money, I don't know whether it was $10,000 or $5,000, but it's, you know, a sizable amount. It was possible to get on a transport.
Okay.
And
Now you're in Prague?
I was
or-
in Prague.
Now you had to go down the Danube or something? Or,
Well, we
or-
were all gathered in Bratislava in Slovakia,
Uh-huh.
got on the Danube, on the
Uh-huh.
river,
Uh-huh.
and with the riverboat going all the way to the Black Sea.
Wait a minute. Now you were on there, and how many of them were there in this group that you were a member of?
Eventually 2,000.
2,000. That's a lot of human souls.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
moving. It must be a big boat, or not-
Well, not
it's,
really. It was, I think there were actually 2 river boats, but
Uh-huh.
then it was all unified.
Uh-huh.
And it was a very interesting thing, because when we arrived in Romania, which was the final destination,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
somehow there were Jews who took the money, and we couldn't proceed. And then
So
Turkish
you've been
Jews,
betrayed by some of your fellow Jews.
I guess so.
It can happen.
But there were some really good Jews in
Uh-huh.
Turkey,
Uh-huh.
and they collected money for us, and we could hire a very old boat which was called Sakaria. I
Uh-huh.
have the pictures of that. Would you like to see
Yeah,
that?
yeah, we can bring them out, and I'll hold them up. Let me help you up with
let
this.
me give you them pictures. So
Okay,
if you-
yeah. And this is, now this is what year, about 39?
39.
39.
Right,
There was
39.
all this just they're getting
Right,
ready to
right,
invade
right.
Poland, and
You see, there were 2,000 people on the boat.
now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold these up, and then they're going to come. It's going to take a minute to come in, but this is let me hold this and give us a chance, because it'll take them a while to focus in on this. They'll come in on close. But this is a picture of the boat. This would have been 1939.
Boat of refugees.
And do you remember still again the name of this boat?
Yeah, the name of the boat was Sakaria.
Sakari. They have a
It
literal
was a
meaning?
Turkish name.
Turkish, huh? It was a Turkish boat?
It was a Turkish boat,
Uh-huh.
completely unseaworthy.
Unseaworthy. You're just
Was,
escaping under any
yeah,
circumstance.
Yeah, yeah.
It was
it
there
was
must have been
totally
a-
rusty.
There must have been a desperation involved in this
Well,
whole
it
venture.
was. Actually, we were very happy that we got on that boat,
Uh-huh.
because we were for 2 or 3 months stranded
Mm-hmm.
on a barge during the worst winter in Romania. It was so cold,
Mm-hmm.
and there was nothing there.
There, you
just
can
the
see now,
barge.
you're not appearing in this picture, but these are some of the people that were among those, you were
Right.
among these people.
I have another picture
And here's
here
another one. Let me hold
that
it here for
shows-
the audience. This is another, oh, I can see it. You can see the sea there and so forth.
Yeah.
And this again, 1939.
That's all
This looks like
1939.
you're at sea. Are you in the
Oh, yes.
Mediterranean by this
Yes,
time?
we
This
are
is the boat to
somewhere in
which
the
you were
Mediterranean.
transported to Israel.
Towards
You were on your way
Palestine.
to,
There was
to
no
Palestine.
Israel.
It was a British mandate.
Everything was Palestine.
And it was illegal to go.
Yeah.
So you
illegal to
were
go.
coming up, this is like the thing in Exodus, in a sense.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
basically very simple, only we were not returned. We were put in a detention camp like prisoners.
You were when you arrived at where?
When,
at
when
Haifa?
we
Or
arrived, and when we arrived in the near Palestine, a British boat came with a gun, and they shot and stopped us. And then they brought us to Haifa.
Haifa.
And then they put us in these camps. So we were in a camp.
Oh,
like
here
this.
is a picture of a camp. This is in Israel.
Yeah.
Or it was called Palestine.
Yeah, that's already in Palestine.
And that was under the administration?
Here you can already see me. That's me here.
Oh, I see. You are there.
Yeah, I'm
I can
already
hardly,
there.
You're very young, and you would have been about
19, 20.
19 years old.
Right.
And were these people, all the 2,000, were they all Jewish?
Yeah, these were, yeah.
Were there others that were fleeing from the Nazi irrationality, or was just Jewish?
Well, there were lots of people fleeing, but this transport was Jewish. Right.
And then you were put into camps in Palestine under the administration of the British?
Right.
And you were put in those camps, and how did they treat you, and what was the attitude?
Well,
why did they not turn you back? Did they want to turn you back and send you back to
Well, they were
Slava?
sort of, with us, they were somehow more lenient. I was lucky.
No bribery
I was
involved?
always lucky, no bribe.
No bribery
Right.
involved in that,
No
right?
bribe.
But there was bribery involved to get out of that, and there must have been a lot of people fleeing. Some of our great intellectuals fled.
Not too many, because, you know, most people, you couldn't afford it or didn't know about it, and they ended up all in death camps.
There are a number of people who came to the United States fleeing the Nazis, right?
Yeah.
But that was not something that was available to you, or would it have been something?
To me, no.
Yeah. Because of money, or because
well,
of influence, or what?
you needed an affidavit, or you needed some special permits to come to the United States at that time. And so...
You just didn't have the ability to receive.
Right.
Must have been a very trying kind of time. And you had to leave your mother behind, and she was not
My
able
mother
to
was, because there were two transports, and my grandmother, my mother also wanted to stay with my, with her parents, with her mother,
I see.
you know. And so we didn't know that there will be such a horrendous killing.
This is you? Is that you? Is that you? With your
Yeah,
head
that's me.
That's you. Is it? You look very slim.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and very wiry and so forth. But it must have been a very difficult. Were you at this point, when you went to Israel, were you then a Unitarian?
Yeah, I was already
You were
a Unitarian.
Were there any others that were Unitarians?
No,
Or they would be all Jewish?
No,
Be at a
no.
Jewish background?
I was the only one who was religiously non-Jewish.
Religiously non-Jewish, but you've been born and raised in a Jewish context, and it was because of your
my
Jewishness
parents
it was because of the Jewishness that you were fleeing Prague or
Yeah,
fleeing
well,
Central Europe.
certainly.
Yeah, right.
You know, the interesting thing is that the British gave me a kind of a passport or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And they said race, Jewish.
Jewish race.
Race.
Isn't that something?
The
Race.
Palestinians.
A race, yeah.
The British.
The British
Palestine.
did that,
Yeah.
Well, the British were caught in between and
So they were also, you know, like...
And that's 39, that's very early, and so we're leading up to 48 when the state was declared by the UN and that sort of thing, and there was all the war going on, but you were able you were in a camp, and then you were able to integrate yourself into Palestinian society. And,
very, very well. There was no problem in that sense.
Are you speaking English, Hebrew? What, did you do Hebrew from when you were young?
I spoke a little bit Hebrew. But it took me 7 years to really be capable of holding a job where the language was important.
And they had Ben Yehuda, somebody, I'm not sure, started the modern Hebrew. It was a revival of the language.
Yeah, Ben Yehuda was
It was he, right?
Yeah, he was one of the pioneers.
Did you study, we didn't get back to any university training or anything you'd done like that, but
no,
had you studied?
I was taking courses in the language.
Right. Okay. In Israel?
In Israel.
Or in Palestine.
Right.
And then had you studied ancient Hebrew in the university back in
No,
Palestine?
we didn't. No, we studied modern
There's
Hebrew.
the distinction between ancient Hebrew and modern.
Yeah, but you can understand it.
You can?
Probably, yeah.
And read?
For example, when you read the Bible, you see, most of it is the same like modern English.
Really? Okay.
Like modern Hebrew.
Uh-huh.
Some of it is more like Aramaic or, different language.
Okay, so it did. And English, what was your native language? Was it?
Czech.
Czech, okay. So you knew Czech?
I went to a Czech, what they call a real gymnasium.
Uh-huh.
You see.
Gymnasium's like a high school?
Well, this is where you already study Latin.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And
university, serious study, yeah.
Yeah.
And you were always,
like college.
you were always a serious student.
Well, I was always on my own. I always tried to study more or different things that were conventionally taught in schools.
There's a term, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
Autodidact.
Yeah. I think that's an important term, don't you?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Where you're learning something because you're really interested in it, rather than a catechism of something where you're supposed to learn it to pass an exam or something.
And also schools brainwash people.
I think so. Most of our institutions do, yeah.
Because there is a vested interest either of a national nature or some economic nature, political philosophy, and so on. Right.
Yeah.
And I was always, because of my early teachers, I was always oriented towards having an independent, free mind.
Oh, well, that's a subversive thing to have.
Critical mind, but a positive mind.
All right, and critical thinking.
Critical and positive.
And positive, yeah. Those are very subversive attitudes to have in a society where people are being turned to be robots within an economic system.
Well, I was very lucky. I was always able, although I was quite a radical activist in many ways, I was always able to go to the edge of the cliff and not over it.
Not take that last step. Just sort of look over the precipice. Look over the precipice.
I'm still here.
Yeah, that's right. You're here after all these years, and you've been in the presence of and influenced by some of the great lights. You were friends with and associated with Israel Shayak.
Well, with Buber, Hannah Arendt. I knew all these people.
At the time. Now, fill us in a little bit. 1939, 1940, wars raging, that sort of thing in the world. The Zionist endeavor is, I suppose, getting new converts from where it hadn't been really very well accepted when Herzl first put the idea forth by people who were coming out of the traditional thing. There was a great opposition to the idea of the establishment of a Jewish state in what was then Palestine and so forth. You were involved in that as well, and you're on the ground, as it were.
Well, that touches
Fill us in a little bit of the context of the thinking of the people that were there, including Martin Buber was there by then at the, when you arrived in Israel?
That touches on the essence of Martin Buber's life work.
He was a giant.
See? Now, he was a writer, but, he had on his finger such a huge, how do you call it?
Vocabulary or?
No, like a fistula.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
Like
a wart? Or?
Like a wart or something.
Oh, really? Well, that's something.
He was writing with a Parker ball pen when I met him.
When did you meet him?
Well, I met him more personally than later on, probably in 1950 or so.
Oh, so late, yeah.
So he was writing with a heavy, thick ball pen. And this callus here was so enormous.
He wrote a lot of words with that pen.
Apparently he never used a typewriter. He must have written everything handwriting. He had a wonderful handwriting.
Okay.
I have a
You have an
sample
example? Yeah, let's see if we can get it out. Yeah, let me hand this up to you. You get it to him, we can show that. Yeah.
See, his handwriting was like really beautiful.
You actually have
This is when he was already about, I don't know, in 1957.
Now oh yeah, that's beautiful. The handwriting, Palmer's method teachers of penmanship would be very happy with his writing. Yeah, he wrote very well.
You know, this is
is in German, or what is it, Hebrew? Or
this is in German.
This is in German, right? Yeah. Okay.
But
That's the actual handwriting of Martin Buber. Was this a letter, or was
That's
this
a letter. And
to
it's
you?
a very
or?
interesting. No, it's a letter
General.
to one of his friends.
Okay.
But interesting in this letter is something that I think indicates that he took LSD.
Really?
Because he writes this from Switzerland.
Well, that was 48. It was discovered.
No.
I think it was discovered in 1948.
Yeah, well, that was much later.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is
but
57.
in this letter, he says.
So he was a freak,
He
huh?
says, no. He says in this letter, my dear friend, I have experienced something that is so overwhelmingly spiritual that I wish that you would experience it too.
And did he say
So
what that something
he didn't
was?
say what.
What induced him? Well,
I
it could
don't
have
know,
been an epiphany.
But it
could have been an
but
epiphany.
It sounded to me like if he was saying something that he didn't want to put in writing.
Well, you know, I've done a lot of programs. I did programs with Timothy Leary, who was a great psychotherapist.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, he was an interesting fellow. And there was another man named Alpert, who was a Ram
Timothy
Dass.
Leary is a Humanist of the Year of the Church of Humanism.
Oh, is he really? Okay, he's great. But Alpert was became Ram Dass, right? And he's well known. And he had been in. They had that LSD, lysergic acid. I guess it was discovered Hoffman or something in 1948 in Switzerland. But he had been with a rabbi, not a rabbi, a guru, a holy man in India who followed the Vedic traditions of
Ram Dass.
No, the Ram Dass was with this man, and he gave him some of this. And the man took it, and he said it was interesting, but he said that the biological effects of that were very similar to what he experienced through the Vedic discipline reaching it. So there are other states of reaching a spiritual position that are not drug-induced. It's just the drug sort of set the neurotransmitters within the brain in a context where you're sort of just put there by drug. But he could have experienced that without having. You were making a joke about how he'd done LSD.
when Henry Luce, the publisher of Life magazine, took LSD.
He did. I didn't know he had.
He changed. And the nature of the magazine changed. And it stopped.
I'll be darned, really.
It took years and years before it was again reestablished. Because the effect is so profound. And it could be also dangerous.
Well, it would be dangerous because it affects
it's a very powerful chemical.
It sure is, and it affects and we didn't know. I mean, the thing is, we're living in an age where we're discovering all these things. We didn't know that there were.
Let's go back to Buber. Because, that's
with or without lysergic acid, he had an epiphany that he was writing in that letter, right?
Let me first show you the picture of Buber.
All right.
I think that everybody should see
I'll hold it up, and then they'll try
the greatest Jewish philosopher of our time.
You feel this? I feel the same.
Oh, definitely. And a prophetic figure.
A prophetic figure.
Absolutely prophetic, because he was the one person who drastically stood up against the horror that we are experiencing today after so many years after his death.
Which horror are you referring to?
I'm referring about the bloodletting between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
The reason.
You see?
Oh, yeah, right. He stood up against
the bloodshed. He wanted to prevent it. He didn't want to see what is happening now and what is probably or possibly coming. This is not the end.
Okay.
You see?
Yeah. So this is the great man. This is he himself. Huh?
That is him.
And he had written I and Thou.
He has
and the idea of people
books.
relating in an I-thou context rather than an I-it objectification of other people. A huge concept is very important to most spiritual and a lot of political thinking as well, it would seem.
Most people don't understand it. They
think you said they have to have a
just
different.
Like but there is one part in the book that if I somehow paraphrase it.
Yes, please.
Brings out the essence of the I and Thou. basically, as an abstraction, it means not relating to people as objects.
Correct.
But relating to them in an authentic way.
Right.
Now, practically, it would
Huge
mean
idea.
something like this. Imagine that you are facing a tree. And he writes about it like this, but I'm paraphrasing it somewhat. You are standing there and you see this beautiful tree. And the tree is, you know, the grandeur of it. It's just there, big. And so you can think, well, this is a wonderful tree. What can I do with it?
I've thought that on a number of occasions. Trees are beautiful things.
I can cut it down, make out of it furniture. I can use it to warm up people during the winter. I can do lots of things with it, right? This is the I-it relations, because you relate to the tree as an object, as an it.
To be manipulated
well,
to your benefit.
You don't relate to it in the way that is really authentic. How do you relate to it when it's authentic? You stand there and you see the tree, and suddenly there is no thought about any utilitarian kind of interpretation of the experience. You just see there a miracle out of nothing, out of a little nothing.
Acorn, from a little acorn.
Suddenly you have this vision. It's a trunk with arms, with a crown.
Yes.
It reaches
with a grandeur, absolutely,
nothing. You didn't do it, nothing. And suddenly
just
you are overwhelmed by this existential being of this, and you relate to it, and you see, I am like the tree, and the tree is like me. We are part of something, you know. This is already a kind of a realistic mysticism that suddenly puts you in touch with a kind of a universality that makes life, how should I say, an organic,
whole,
cosmic unit.
Yes, right. What a huge and beautiful concept.
So, you know, this is the I and thou.
Yeah, and that's a tree, or that could be another human being as well.
No, he's talking about it, the I and thou. Talks about it in three ways. First, the relation of person to person.
Right.
Secondly, the relation of a person to an institution.
Okay.
And third, relating to God. But by God, he does not mean, you know, just the kind of a superficial, you know, dogmatic type of God that most people believe in.
Right.
It's, again, the I and thou. He, as a matter of fact, he says, even the person who is cursing the word God, but is in the I-thou relation, is serving. You see?
Yeah, right, yeah.
So
boy, there's just lessons galore.
Yeah, well, and it transcends superstition, and it transcends religious fanaticism.
Okay.
And it leads to a very profound and deep creative realism. See?
Yeah.
Now, when
I can see where it ties into a humanist kind of a view of things that you have that's been inspirational to you.
Well, I have his voice where he's saying something very humanistic.
Okay.
Can I play it for you?
Sure, let's see. Now, if I'm not mistaken, we were talking about this before.
Yeah.
You, because let me have this, and I'm going to put these photographs down now. And so we have this now, and and let me just set it up. And what we have is, we have his voice on a recording, and maybe you can talk to it a little bit, and then I'm going to hold the words up. So and I'm going to hold this up before you start, okay? So let them come in close focus on this. Yeah, but let them come in close focus on this. Let them get the focus on this. These are the actual words that he's saying.
Right.
And maybe you can tell us where it was and when it was said and what it was about. But if they could come in close on this particular This is what the words actually are, but they're a little hard to differentiate. You're going to play it on your machine into your microphone.
Right, right.
But let's see if we can't get close focused on this then, and then you could tell us a little bit now, if you would. Where was he talking? What was the event, and what was the circumstance?
The event was the celebration of his 80th birthday in the community.
We have the words now. Go ahead.
The community church in New York City.
And this would have been in what year, more or less?
That must have been in 58.
58.
I think so.
And you recorded that yourself, or you have a record?
No, someone recorded it, but I have the tape.
Okay, and you have the tape here, and you've got it on this little machine.
This is just a little snippet of
This is the snippet, and it's the words that are contained here. So I'll hold this up while you play that, and why don't you place it, and we can hear the word of Martin Buber talking at the event.
You tell me when to start.
I think you could start it now.
Okay.
Then. And then you can just read the words and maybe understand them a little clearer.
Okay.
And then hold that up to your microphone.
Now, these words are identical with the sound.
Okay, now hold that up toward your microphone when you play it. These are words, the voice of Martin Buber. Now hold it up to your microphone. Okay, and this was the words that he said? And,
this is what he said, actually.
Okay, that's good.
Now, this is a very interesting paradoxical statement.
Okay.
Because when he's talking about
I'll put this
messianic idea, and he's talking about the Jewish people being at the center of that, he is not talking about what is called Jewish nationalism.
Okay.
He's talking about a kind of, I would say, and it could be very easily misunderstood. about a kind of a humanistic socialism.
Okay.
Where there would be economic justice, political freedom, and
another
a
level
of completely different
elevated level
absolutely,
from the normal.
Absolutely,
right.
absolutely. And that's why he's saying that the salvation of the Jewish people, I'm paraphrasing it,
Yes.
has nothing to do with aggression, but it has to do with the return to the prophetic spirit that has to do with reality, not an abstract spirit.
I see. And did he see there was a conflict, if that's the right term, between his view of Zionism
that's another
and
thing.
Let's say Ben-Gurion, much less Jabotinsky
Well,
and
let
so
me,
forth.
let me show you.
And there was a debate or a conflict between Judas Magnus and other people
Right.
that were in opposition to what was being proclaimed in 1948 and so forth. The Zionism that was being proclaimed and the conditions under which it was being claimed in a normal political, national kind of reading of things, a serious division between he and Magnus and yourself, I think, perhaps, and so forth, and what was actually being proclaimed in the ground.
Well,
is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Let me show you his main antagonist.
Okay.
This is
This is Jabotinsky, I take it.
Jabotinsky,
The revisionist.
the revisionist who advocated Jewish nationalism to an extreme. Now we have to understand that Jabotinsky was not some kind of a devil.
He was a quiet-spoken man. Yeah.
Jabotinsky predicted the Holocaust.
Before?
Oh,
okay.
yes. I heard Jabotinsky speaking in the year 1933
Really?
at the Zionist Congress in Prague.
I'll be darned.
And I was surprised because I thought that he is a kind of a firebrand.
Yes.
He was a very calm, rational speaker who was advocating what I would call today Jewish fascism, which meant go there, go to Palestine, take it over, the Arabs won't like it, we have to fight for it, and it's a question of life and death.
Well,
so he was also an honest man, you know, but he was thinking on the extremely opposite lines than Martin Buber.
Martin Buber, in between there might have been, Ben-Gurion.
Well,
and you had the people that they were going to reestablish, coming out of the Holocaust, they were going to reestablish the state of Israel, the goal of Zionism. And Jabotinsky and his followers, the revisionists, understood that the people who were there were not going to accept this, except in terms of it being another example of Western colonial imposition and taking of the land where they were, and there was going to be a reaction against it, and that in the face of that, you're not going to be able to be doing it, establishing that as the Torah proclaimed, so forth, that you're not going to be accepted as with flowers and greetings and hosannas that you've come to do that. There's going to be a resistance, and you're going to have to do it by military force, and that was something that was in objection to by many of the people who read the Torah in terms of the end time ingathering of the Jewish people, and the Jabotinsky was just a realistic reading that it was going to have to be done with brute force like all other nationalistic...
Buber said it very clearly.
Is there something to what I'm just saying there? I mean, does that make some sort of sense?
You see, what Buber says is, we wanted to go the difficult way. The easy way, was to attack it. That was the easy way. It was not an easy way, actually, because there were people, you know, when the Irgun and Lehi were violently attacking the British, you see.
Stern Gang?
That was, well, they call it Stern Gang, but, you know, it's just the same thing like the terrorists today.
Yes,
we call them terrorists, and other people call them freedom fighters.
Yeah, right.
You see.
Yeah, right.
So,
well, George Washington was called a terrorist by George III, I believe.
well,
and Mandela was called a
you
terrorist.
see, this is
yeah.
all
right. It's the propaganda. Yeah.
That's the relativistic, depending on whose side you are.
That's right. But
see?
there were different ideas of Zionism.
Exactly.
And Mr. Buber, Martin Buber, Judas Magnus, and others had a certain view. Ben-Gurion, you didn't mention, you said Jabotinsky's Pharaoh, but the idea of Ben-Gurion, there was also conflict with Ben-Gurion, or even the existing state as it came to be after 1948. What was Martin Buber's feelings as that became reality on the ground?
Well, I spoke to Buber at one point, and I asked him whether it would be helpful if he would have a dialogue with Begin and with Ben-Gurion. And Buber said to me, with Begin, under no circumstances. With Ben-Gurion, he said like this with his hand he made, and he said, maybe.
Did they ever get together?
Eventually they did, yeah. Now,
and what was, when the facts on the ground came to be that it wasn't going to be greeted with rose petals and it wasn't going to be a peaceful thing, like the Torah said it would have to be, in a world of justice and so forth. What was the feeling of those who felt that there was a need to do it with dialogue and so forth, when it became clear that it was going to be a violent kind of clash? And it must have been a little bit different because Mr. Buber stayed at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem for a good deal of his advanced years.
I was there and I witnessed the most critical times of the establishment of the State of Israel, because I lived 7 years under the British when it was a mandate, you know, and
after you arrived in the boat.
And then another 8 years when it was the State of Israel. So I've seen how everything developed.
You were there at the beginning, yeah.
My first wife was Betar, one of the Betarim. She was one of the revisionists.
Oh, really? Jabotinsky?
So some of the heads of the people who were going out to kill the British and, you know, commit all kinds of terrorist acts like blowing up the
King David Hotel.
They were coming to my house all the time, which was, you know, unfortunately one of the reasons that I had to divorce her, because she was so politically, you know,
a firebrand.
But we loved each other otherwise. But you know,
humanity.
Sometimes you can't.
So there's a whole book to be written around that story. You just said, you know, a movie, a heck of a movie or something. But
So, you know, I asked Ben-Gurion. I met Ben-Gurion also in the framework of my activities, and I asked him. He was in his home on Keren Kayemet Street.
In Jerusalem?
In Tel Aviv.
In Tel Aviv, okay.
He invited me, you know, because I was at that time, I was a war register, but I did serve in the military, in the medical corps of the Israeli army.
Okay. And was there a Zionist movement of, in keeping with Martin Buber, Judas Magnus, that you were associated with, and that philosophy? And how was that regarded by the realistic Ben-Gurion or even Jabotinsky followers?
You see, for me, Zionism was not the political Zionism of Ben-Gurion and Begin.
What was it?
It was a spiritual idea that had to do with this great biblical vision that the world can evolution can evolve into a world that will be based on justice, freedom, love, and all these values.
Beautiful idea, and it's one that's been there. And the Jewish people were in diaspora for a couple thousand years, saying each year, next year in Jerusalem. Did you feel that it was, in a certain sense, as an American term, jumping the gun? That it was being done ahead of time, or the idea that the state was actually being achieved and they were trying to, there was no Moshiach, as it did call for in the Torah. What was your feeling toward it? You were there, living on the ground. What was your feeling toward it as events actually, it was established and you had these people who think your ideas were nice, but they didn't relate
Well,
to the
let me
political
say
and
this.
necessary realities of the interests of the
I
Jewish
stopped
people.
being a national Zionist
Mm-hmm.
about 2 months after I arrived in Palestine.
Really? That's back
Yeah,
in 39
yeah,
again.
in 39.
You had been a
But,
realist like Zionist before that?
well, I was a mild Zionist.
Yeah, you're
but,
19.
yeah.
You're young. Yeah, okay.
But when I arrived,
Uh-huh.
I discovered that Zionism, which for the idealists like myself meant that the Jews, after so many thousands of years of suffering, will suddenly have a country where they will live, you know, a beautiful life and behave in a way like real human beings.
In a world that is
yeah.
based on ultimate universal justice,
Well,
which it called for
something
in
that
the
they will
ancient reading.
create a beautiful country, you
Right.
know.
You didn't relate to the idea of Moshiach?
No, that had nothing.
That was not something that related to your philosophy. Okay, right, okay.
I was
All
a
right.
Unitarian,
Okay,
so you know.
you've really got an interesting
Messiah.
background.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, okay.
I did consider Jesus to be a messianic personality in that respect that Jesus preached love,
Yeah.
and he also preached economic justice.
Too bad it hasn't been followed by our
Yeah,
political
yeah.
leaders.
It was just in a primitive way, but
Yeah.
in its essence, it, you
Well,
know...
most of our spiritual leaders
Yeah.
said care for the least among us,
So
and
I
it's
would say
been
that-
ignored by most all of our political leaders and still is today.
Yeah, love is a redeeming power.
Uh-huh.
So that would be, you know, one of my concepts, if I would use the word messianic, you know, which I don't.
Okay, okay,
Uh,
okay.
but when I arrived there,
Yeah.
I saw that the Jews are just like other people,
Yeah.
that they are greedy, that they compete with each other, that they don't give a damn if someone else suffers, that there are good people amongst them, that there are some geniuses there, you know, a mixture of everything.
Just like
But-
everybody else.
But
huh?
like everybody else,
Yeah,
exactly.
uh-huh.
So, you know, that was like pretty sort of,
Eye-opening.
yeah. So I thought that this is Zionism.
Mhm.
So I
This is
stopped being
Zionism.
Zionist.
And what
You
were
see?
you then, as a Zionist, right through the birth of the State of Israel? What were you calling yourself? What were you feeling
I
yourself?
called
What
myself
emotions did you have?
a
And what
human-
emotions
I
did
was
Martin
a-
Buber
I was a-
have as he was able to
I was a
express them?
humanist
You were
because
a humanist?
I
and-
became a humanist already in about the year of 1935 or so, when I was introduced to a book on humanism entitled Humanistic Ideals by Thomas Garrick Masaryk.
Okay.
So I was a humanist.
A Czech?
A Czech, the
Yeah.
president of
Yeah.
the Czech Republic, a
Uh-huh,
philosopher,
okay.
you see.
Uh-huh.
So I was a humanist. I was a humanist who was suddenly stuck in Palestine,
Uh-huh.
you know, who was not religiously a Jew, who did not relate to the Jews as Jews, but relating to the Jews as people.
Okay, and what was and to the degree that you were in association, what was the attitude of Mr. Buber during that transition period and as the state and the Israeli state and
Well,
the
Buber-
work of the, of labor and Ben-Gurion and the people who were establishing Golda Meir and that kind of thing.
Well,
What was his attitude
Buber
toward
was-
that,
Buber-
including the reaction that was coming from the Palestinian people who were
Yeah.
being displaced?
Buber was the head
Uh-huh.
with another very important personality, namely Judah Magnus.
Judah Magnus, yeah.
Judah Magnus was the first president of the Hebrew University,
Okay.
an American rabbi from Temple Emmanuel in New York City,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
who, with Buber,
Mm-hmm.
were against the establishment of a Jewish state.
But they're living in a Jewish
wait,
state.
wait,
So
wait.
what's their attitude?
Wait, let
toward
me
it?
make the
And you
point.
were. You were a humanist living in a
wait,
Jewish
Wait,
state.
I can't, I have to make that point
Sorry,
before
okay.
I say anything else.
Okay.
They were against the establishment of the Jewish state because they wanted a binational state, which was a completely different thing. They wanted to first establish some kind of a relation which would enable the Jews to live there with the Palestinians in some state of relative peace, you see. So they were
Right, that
against the
would've-
establishment of the State of Israel.
Uh-huh.
But then,
The way it was being established.
right, but then it was established in 1948
Yeah.
after Ben-Gurion came to New York,
Uh-huh.
and in the Biltmore Hotel
Mhm.
got together with some Jewish millionaires here, and they decided that they are going to establish the State of Israel.
They put
You
great
see?
pressure on Mr. Truman.
Tremendous, right?
Tremendous pressure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now what happened
And they were
was,
very able to be influential.
what happened
Yeah.
was that decision
Mhm.
triggered the attack of the Arabs on the Jews in Palestine. See, not the other way. You know, it's always represented that the Jews didn't do anything and they were suddenly attacked by the Arabs.
Well, there were some people who went out into the frontier in North America who thought the Indians were going to be happy to have them be displaced by the settlers
But
that were coming in. And it's along the colonial attitude of Western European people who went and colonized the world, or even the idea that Mr. Bush had that the people in Iraq are going to greet us with great hosannas and flowers.
Really?
And it's a part of a Western colonial attitude that I think much of the world is very happy to have off their back, that has been prevalent since Christopher Columbus in a way, possibly.
That's a parallel, yeah. There would be a parallel. In any event, they were not against the Jewish state. They were just against the establishment of a Jewish state by force.
Which is the only way it
Against the
could be
will-
done in realistic terms, right?
Maybe not.
Oh,
We
there
don't
might have
know.
been an alternative.
It could have been done maybe differently, you
Uh-huh.
see. But that would have required an enormous effort and the great intelligence that the Jews probably had
Mhm.
to accomplish that. But they didn't want it.
Mhm.
So suddenly the war erupted. And I can tell you, the day when the state was established, I was in Tel Aviv on the largest plaza called the Mugrabi Plaza.
We've only got 1 minute left. We're going to have
Oh,
to do
really?
another program, so
Oh.
try and wind it up. Well, you were there, and this is
it
chapter 1.
It was the saddest moment of my life.
Really.
Everybody was dancing and cheering, and I was already seeing the bloodshed and the things that are happening today.
You were seeing the future that we're living in now.
Right,
Well,
exactly.
there's no way we're going to be able to get this in because we've come to the end of the hour. You're too interesting. You've had such an interesting story. We're going to have to do another piece. But Reverend Joseph, thank you very much, and I really appreciate your coming in and sharing it. And do you think Martin Buber, we could run the credits now, and so do you think Martin Buber would have been experiencing the same thing on that day when everyone else was jumping for joy?
I'm sure that he was not happy.
Uh-huh.
Nobody of those people were happy.
None of those people
No,
that had
there was a
more-
whole group of people,
Uh-huh.
some of the most prominent professors and activists, and social,
including this giant of a philosopher, Martin Buber,
absolutely.
Judas Magnus. There was an oppositional pattern to that, and now we're just suffering that now. I mean, the results of the fact that that was not the way it went, and it's a huge question, perhaps the most important one confronting the human society. I thank you for sharing the insights that you had with some of the major people that were involved in that. We're going to have to do a follow-up to this because this is chapter 1.
Well, there's much more to it.
I know. Thank you very much for bringing all this in. Your pleasure to have us Perceptions. Invite you to tune in. We'll come back again tomorrow. Reverend Joseph Ben-David, thank you very, very much for such a very well-led life and for coming into the program. I really appreciate it very much.
It was a pleasure to be with you again.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. So we'll be coming back tomorrow. Please tune in.